always do start out with our land acknowledgement. I have the tribal nations maps that I'll put into the chat box. Jenny, is there anything you'd like to add about this today? All right, I'll keep going then to our racial injustice acknowledgement.
Sorry, I was trying to find my unmute button. So I can read this. We acknowledge the pain and trauma from over 400 years of racism in the United States. We stand with our communities of color, especially those who identify as and/or are categorized as African American. We also acknowledge the intersectionality of those, all kinds of intersectionalities, but particularly of those who identify both as people of color and individuals with disabilities. We commit to centering our work to dismantle systemic racism and disrupt ableist structures.
I love when you said the all kinds of intersectionalities. While I don't have a I wanted to take off my background because my hands disappear, but I think that having a frame might help to put our Pride Month acknowledgement recognition.
Yay, Pride Month.
So for those of you who haven't been with us, I can't imagine I could put anyone here with us new today, but poll up, but I don't think that's going to be the case. So we can zip right through these. I keep meaning to change the word from tips to reminders. So let me just go through. Everyone knows to rename yourself and you know how to raise your electronic hand and to annotate. So welcome. Thank you for joining us. So our first opportunity for annotation is, whoops, went by too quickly, is to kind of connect with one of the teaching and learning beliefs today. So feel free to put into the chat box or to annotate and put a stamp on which one do you want, which one kind of speaks to you as we engage in our last session together. I think that the building relationships has been fantastic. Thank you, Donna. I do apologize that I don't know everyone's names because a whole month goes by between when I saw you last time, and I have to have my notes and take a look and through and see. But nonetheless, we do give a try, and actually maybe this time we'll have some time. Jenny and I can go into the breakout rooms, or at least with you and learn more from you as well as with you. So I think for me it would be the building relationships. I love how Bethany, I agree, that growth mindset. We need to be constantly learning. Jenny, which one are you focusing
Like
on?
a reminder to actively engage all students. As we know, all students are not the same and they don't respond to the same things. So I just want to keep it in my mind to continue to look for things and continue to stay on top of providing new experiences for students in hopes that they can find a way to connect.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Makes me think of Rick Lavoie and his motivation book and the video as well as, and just talking about how different people are motivated by different things. So, thank you. No problem. We have somebody who has to leave at 3:40. So just shortly. Thank you. No problem, Brittany. Nice to see you with us as well. All right. Well, let's get started then. We have our invitations, engagement. We saw that. Thanks, Bethany. Refraining from judgment. We think we know all these, so we're just going to zip through. We'll put the Jamboard link in because there will be opportunities to join there. So let me put that into the chat box for you. Everyone in meeting. And we're going to celebrate. Here's where we are today at the very end. One of the things that we don't do, but I wish I had thought of in the past, was give us a moment when we're here looking at where we've been to raise something that is circling for us, something that we're thinking about from a previous class that we want to verbalize or process orally or question or bring to the group. So I'm just going to give us a moment to take a look and see where we've been this whole time and where we went through looking at structured literacy and the profiles of students who struggle. We then focused on phonemic awareness and that basic word recognition skills. We looked to reading long words, so multisyllabic strategies and morphology. We looked at spelling, we looked at fluency, we looked at vocabulary, oral language comprehension, students with reading difficulties, so some structured literacy interventions, which I think part of us were saying, well, isn't that the whole book? And then also written expression. And lastly, we're putting it all together through the mixed reading difficulties piece here. So is there anything that anyone would like to raise to the group? Whoops, sorry, I didn't mean to put that back before we move on. All right, let's jump in then. We're in chapter 10. Oops, let me clear all that up for us. So the materials are the same. We have the participants. We have the materials that are in. Actually, we'll go through those a little bit. I think everybody here has already put yourself into the Jamboard. So we'll just kind of slip through here. You know about our resources. And let's jump into chapter 10. So the multi-component structured literacy interventions for mixed reading difficulties. So these are some things that Jenny and I pulled out and some reminders. So I like the examples of the language comprehension weakness and the problems in word recognition. Jenny, do you want to talk about the first couple that I think you added? And I will add in something that a form that you found looks like from U of O on before, during, and after.
So, yeah, the first couple just have to do with, it's kind of like when I was looking at this chapter, I was thinking, how does this sum up the whole book? And one of the things that it did was to remind us what we learned about in chapter 1, when you have kids who have mixed reading difficulties, and that the two components of those are word recognition and language comprehension. That comes from chapter 1, but it also evokes the notion of the simple what theory? What is it called, Alicia?
Simple view of reading.
Simple view of reading. Thank you. That word recognition times language comprehension equals fluent and successful reading. And another reminder, basically, this is very general, that when you have students who have these multiple issues, then necessarily our approach with them needs to be multi-component, needs to have multi-components.
I appreciate that the priorities, I really liked that. Let's say, where do we need to focus our priorities with our interventions? We can't do everything all at once, despite that title, that movie, but we have to focus on where are we going to get the biggest bang for our buck, and not saying we're going to only focus on that, but that's where we're going to put our strongest emphasis while we pay attention to the other things as well. Okay, so I pulled out some of the elements that she called out of multi-component interventions. These were found on page 217. So I'm just going to give us a moment to take a look through with these. And I mean, I just find them just good reminders. So and when we think about multi-component, what are we talking about? We're talking about both language skills and foundational reading skills. We're talking about data assessments that look at how the students are doing. So we're using those to differentiate our instruction and to monitor progress. Supplement rather than supplant again. And one of the things, this one I think should go down with, I'm going to get my little here. Supplement and supplant, but also integrate. I'm going to bring those two together. Integrate those interventions with each other and with the core. Maximize that time that we spend reading and writing. Whatever we can do, and this is one of the reasons why I say let's bring in some decodables a lot, so they can be reading them independently and feeling that success. And time, this is one of the things I think we struggle with the most in schools, don't you? Is how do we find the time to do what we need to do for kids to get them the biggest bang for their buck, that intensity of that intervention. Jenny, did you have any thoughts on this that I pulled out?
No, it's just reminding me of background in Big DI. And so one of the beautiful things about Big DI, especially SRA programs, is that all of this is incorporated together. but I'm also thinking about the tenets of Big DI include not only the components of language and how they're meshed together, but also things like pace, like enthusiasm, like immediate error correction, all those things that we learned, back in the day to do our reading interventions. Those things are important, and we should remember them as we're thinking about this other piece. And so when I say Big DI, that's capital D, capital I, and that it used to be defined by SRA programs. And when I talk about little DI, that's more of a theoretical underpinning for how we teach. And so little DI is direct instruction, but it's more the format, like I do, we do, you do. So that it's teacher driven. There's immediate error correction. There's practicing until students master different skills. And all those things are important as we go through this kind of either core instruction or intervention.
That in some notes as you talk. So when we talked about integration of interventions, these were just some of the other pieces that I pulled out. Again, page 219, that consistent feedback that goes into the DI that Jenny was just talking about. The decode, internal integration of components. So for example, that she mentioned decoding patterns and comprehension skills. So you're using the decoding patterns, but you're also bringing in those to comprehension skills. They also talked about application of skills and teaching for transfer, so that we are working with this and practicing it so that we can use it for in other settings, instead of just, you want to make sure they're being able to transfer it outside of your intervention setting. And then when it comes to teaching, here are some examples she gave: teaching reading through writing. People who take my classes too, and not just this book study, you've probably heard me say a lot, teaching reading through writing, teaching reading through writing. Bethany, haven't you? And Jenny, you're nodding your head. This has really become the thing, I think, more this year than ever before. I'm realizing that importance, teaching reading through writing. And what I loved how she drew attention to with spelling words, it develops our phonemic awareness and focuses our attention on the internal parts of words and provides orthographic practice. And
One of the things I was going to say is that when we think about kids with specific learning disabilities, one of the things that you sometimes hear is that kids don't generalize. And we're going to take a look later at some of the different components of some DI stuff that is built in to get them to generalize. And so if you've ever seen, for example, Reading Mastery Alphabet or Reading Mastery Curriculum, you know how it's printed in black ink, but there are some letters that are red in Reading Mastery? So you might see a black L and a black M and a black N and a black O and then a red O. That is absolutely designed to get kids to generalize. So when you think about kids with specific learning disabilities, a lot of times the issue is that they don't generalize. And so almost everything that they are asked to do within one of these lessons, or one of the lessons we should ask them to do, is to get to the point where they can recognize that when you see this shape, it's an O, right? And it doesn't matter if it is got thick letters or thin letters, or red letters or black letters, that's an O.
I appreciate that, Matthew. The next piece there on text structure and writing summary is I really like how she drew attention to the fact that this can support with reading comprehension. And this is, again, remember, I always say teaching reading through writing, is we can help our kids understand text complexity, the syntax that's complex, understanding the, summarizing is getting to the gist, can help you then identify what's the gist in what you're reading as well. So having those two pieces. And then, of course, she added on morphology, which we all know is something we really want to pay attention to a lot. One thing too that I've added from on the last slide, you'll remember we talked about assessments. So I wanted to remind us, I can't quite remember if we included this in a previous session or not, because Jenny and I thought you made this with me, Jenny, I can't remember.
I think I saw what it was based upon, and it's sort of like a hybrid of my thing and this thing.
Okay. It must have been, and you and I must have done one, and then it
Yeah.
kind of morphed in other things. So this slide actually came from a class I did for administrators. And I have a handout here that goes along with it. And I think that this is just an important reminder for us as we think about how we find out what our students need. So number one, I mean, we're all doing those screeners that tell us who needs help, but then we need to look at the diagnostics to find out what skills they need. And then of course you have the progress monitoring to find out whether or not what you're doing is working. Notice we have the two ways. You can have the individual or class check for comprehension at the lesson level. And you can then have up to 36 weeks of monitoring once a week. Those are just some examples. And then your outcome measures at the end is how are we doing as a state or district or school? That's our state tests. Those are summative, not formative.
Can I say something about these two?
Please do.
So one of the things that's important about this table is that on the right-hand side, what you're comparing a student's input to is different for each and every one of these things. So for benchmarking, you're comparing it to a norm. You're comparing how a student does on an assessment to a norm. When you're doing diagnostics, you're comparing what a student does on an assessment to the correct answer. When you're doing progress monitoring, and this is where I diverge from this table just a smidge, when you're doing progress monitoring, you are comparing a student's performance to a baseline that you set for that student. You're looking towards a goal, an individual goal. And here's why this is important. Let's say you've got a fifth grader who reads at a second grade level. You're not going to progress monitor the student in fifth grade material. You're going to progress monitor them in the material that they're learning at the time. So, so their individual goal is going to be set based on their baseline. You're going to add, certain number of words per week, and how you do that can vary. And there are tables, and you can make it very precise, or you can ballpark it. But progress monitoring is comparing a student to their own goal. And then outcome measures, again, that goes back to standardized criterion reference, which is, again, comparing their input to a correct answer. And I think that in many ways, so the reason I say that my understanding of progress monitoring diverges a little bit is because it says alternate version of benchmarking or diagnostic. That may be true. When I think of progress monitoring, I think of oral reading fluency for fluency. I think of a maze for comprehension. And so when I was trained, we were told not to mix up our benchmarking assessments with diagnostics, with progress monitoring, to keep all those absolutely separate. And you'll notice that if you use Aimsweb, those, while they're leveled and they might be at the same level, those assessments, the probes, are separate and they stay separate.
And it's funny because I've seen others that combine these two. And so this table comes from, you have different interpretations. This table comes from the 95% group and their book on MTSS, 10 factors for literacy success within MTSS. So, and I totally appreciate that. And where they're talking about this is, for example, if you use a diagnostic that looks at, for example, the David Kilpatrick's PASS that looks at phonemic awareness. And that's something that you can use to progress monitor. So sometimes I think it depends on, yes, and like curriculum-based measurements could be used for both of these. So it depends on the measurement, whether it could be used in both or not.
Yeah, and I think for writing, did I share the handout last time?
Last time, yes.
Yeah, there's a progress monitoring for writing, which is a 1 minute think, 3 minute write, and it's a curriculum-based measure. You can do it, it's free. All the information you need is on the handout that I put in last month's presentation. So that's a good one to know about.
This one also came from that same presentation for administrators. And we have a link, this comes from the Florida Center for Reading Research. And one of the things that my colleague Nova and I appreciated about this, and we actually added this on, was, and the reason why I put this here is think about, we've got that screener that tells us who, now here's our diagnostic that tells us what. Now let's make sure that we are paying attention to our small groups, and we implement both whole group and small group, and we progress monitor to see whether or not we need to change these groups, and whether or not students are in the appropriate place, or if they need to move up or move or get something more intensively. So I'll just give people a moment with those, and notice here that flexible groups are flexible. They change in membership, content size, frequency of meeting. We are targeting critical components in their small groups in that differentiation. And we are looking for mastery, or we're looking for growth. There was some term I heard recently that was instead of mastery, and I really appreciated it. And it might have been from this book, Jenny, maybe, I wonder if you would remember as well. It was something about not so much mastery, but something about building foundations. I'll have to go and look and see.
I like that you added the diagnostic assessments, because again, you're comparing those student input is compared to different things, a norm or correct answer.
And there's one more that I included on assessments, and I'm going to put both of these up. And I actually have these two that I'll put in the chat box for you. One is from Literacy How, the one on the left, and the other one on the right is from AIM. Those didn't work, so I'll have to grab them by link another way. And one of the things I appreciate, I hope you can read those okay, and if not, we can open it up. And here that still didn't work. I'll keep working on getting those in. They should be in the resource guide, and if they're not, I will make sure I get them in. Let me try this. Not opening tab. Oh, I opened the tab accidentally. Sorry. I'm trying to copy. There we go. Copy link address. And put them in. And there we go. There's the first one. And then I'll get the AIMS quick guide, copy link address, and put that in as well. And what I appreciate them is just, it's digging down. What are your kids' needs? And if you'll notice, both of them will say, let me go back to this so we can. This works going. Yes, there we go. So you can see they're both looking at, if your kids are at grade level, great, let's work at that grade level. If not, let's dig deeper. So notice how we're saying, if your reading comprehension is low, let's look at their oral reading fluency. If that's low, let's look at their ability to recognize regular and irregular words. If that's low, let's look at their phonics skills. If that's low, let's look at their phonemic awareness. And then they include the special education referral. This side doesn't do that, and it doesn't look at it as far as what I can't talk. What's low versus, is it weak or is it strong? Consider a need for a language comprehension assessment, or then if this is weak, we go down to, again, going up from comprehension to fluency to word recognition to phonics to phonemic awareness. So very similar messages, just two different formats for that. Anything anyone wants to add? You can explore it in the chat box and when you get the opportunity. These came from page 232. I think that these were just a nice way of kind of a reminder as we wrap up, is some features of structured literacy and the samples that they gave. Notice we have the explicit. Everything's taught, explained, modeled. It's systematic, sequenced. It's organized to minimize confusion. It reviews the skills. It teaches to transfer, as Jenny was talking about. A lot of practice and application of those previous taught skills, multiple ways for that, and that prompt targeted feedback. Anything you want to add?
I think it's a good segue into the next
Perfect.
slide.
Yours.
Oh, this is a little bit hard to read. So what we're going to do is, what this is an observation form from a direct instruction practicum that I used to teach. And so what I thought was, well, let's take out the components from a DI lesson, supporting instruction, small group, and effective small group instruction. So let's go to the next slide because it has the same information exactly, just easier to read.
Okay. Sorry. And you reminded me that I was going to put in a Slingerland lesson. I'll do that too as you talk.
Okay, so here's what I want us to do on this particular slide. This is the same information. It's in list form. And these are the indicators that I used to use to give feedback on big DI instruction. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to take a moment, go through this list. There will be things that you absolutely recognize and that you are able to describe with confidence and a certain security that you know what you're talking about. There might be things in here that you may not have heard of. And so what I'd like you to do is just on a piece of scratch paper, write down 2 things that you feel really certain about. You could describe this to others. You might even be able to teach somebody, maybe a para, how to do this, or a student teacher or practicum student. And then write down a couple of those, and then write down a couple that, well, maybe I think I know what this is, but maybe we're not talking about the same thing. And maybe I'm not sure. So we'll give you about 3 minutes to process this list. And sharing what's 1 or 2 things on this list that you feel confident that you know about. And all of these things factor into how you teach students in a structured literacy lesson. Bethany says allowing appropriate think time. Yes. And I used to make sometimes students count quietly in their heads to 3 before giving a signal so that they could provide wait time. And it's one of John Hattie's high leverage practices, transitioning quickly and smoothly. Yes, these are things you know how to do. You probably know about getting students' attention, and that if you don't have their attention before you start teaching, then you're giving them permission not to give it to you, basically. So those are all some things. Demonstrating a positive attitude. We would always operationalize that. What does it look like? And I would do this thing with my eyes where I'd squinch them up. So they like give them the squinchy eyes, smile at them, make them feel good, right? Adequate prompts, right? Don't get fooled. Those are some things that you're aware of, that you're confident with. Okay, fantastic. Thank you for your participation. And now I want to ask another question. Are there any things on this list with which you're not familiar? Or maybe you could use a refresher, or maybe it's been a minute and you're not sure exactly what that is, or you think you know what you're talking about, but maybe I don't have the same piece. So I'm going to go either chat box, or you can unmute and ask a question.
Jenny, I'll start. Is that because I wasn't trained in DI, part firming.
Okay.
I can see Bethany saying the same thing.
Yeah, part firming. I'm going to table that for just a moment because I have a demonstration that shows what part firming is. Yes, part firming, that's one of them. And we're going to get to that. And what I'll define it, but I'll show you what it is. What part firming is when a student or a group of students misses an item, and you're maybe if you can picture like a bunch of different sounds on a page, and you're going across from left to right, top to bottom, right? And they miss one right in the middle. You correct it, you model the correct answer, stop. That sound is what sound? And then you go back, not necessarily to the beginning, but you go back in time, give them a running start so that they are hitting that after doing some things that they've done correctly. Okay, so that's part affirming. Contingent. Yeah, the contingency has to do with both academic and behavioral feedback. And there are two kinds of feedback. There's academic, and academic feedback is just about whether something is correct or incorrect. So academic feedback would be, hey, you got that whole list correct. Fantastic. Or stop, that word is blank, what word blank. So contingent means same size, same shape. And no, that's congruent, sorry. Contingent means that it matches the situation. So if you said, hey, you got that whole list correct, and they didn't get the list correct, that is not contingent. But it is contingent if you giving them accurate feedback. So behavioral feedback is about nice job following along with your finger. Ah, you answered on my signal. Fantastic. Anything that they do that is a behavior, that's behavioral feedback. It should be contingent. Anything that you give them right or wrong feedback on, that's academic. Okay. What about this?
I want to
Yeah.
go back to the part affirming for a minute. I mean, I understand the going back and practicing what they missed. It's what I twice now I've heard you stop and providing the answer rather than giving the student an answer to fix an opportunity to fix their mistake.
Okay.
And I'm just that's a different approach than we would have done when I was at Chartwell. And I'm just I'm curious. I mean, because maybe it was because I was at a school for kids with dyslexia that we really wanted them to think about and understand and try to fix their things first rather than give it to them. And I'm wondering about the different approaches and your thoughts.
Yeah, so the basic rationale behind the immediate error correction is if they practice it incorrectly, like it takes them 3 times as long to get it
Totally
right.
with you on that. I'm not saying to correct them immediately. I'm saying to stop them and have them try to fix it first.
Oh, have them try to fix it. Okay, so one of the big ideas is a lot of times when you have kids, let's say like we're all familiar with that, reading the first part of the word and the last part of the word, and they get that part correct, but they kind of don't pay attention to the middle, like you were just saying. It allows them to not guess about the right answer. They just repeat it. And the idea is that the skills are taught specifically and with such attention that you can go ahead and correct them, because the phrase that keeps running through my mind right now is they don't know what they don't know. And so it's a way to rapidly get to where you want to be with students. And the other thing is that when they make an error, there are formats for error correction. So if they're in the early stages of reading, you have them say the word, say the most common sounds for the word, and then repeat the word. If they're in 4th, 5th, 6th grade, and it's sort of an upper level reading class, the error correction procedure for a missed word is to spell it, because that gets them to internalize the spelling of that word. So
that goes back to the teaching reading through writing.
Yeah,
that was what I did with Katerina all the time.
So anybody else wondering about overall correct and first time correct? What's that about? All right, I'm going to combine overall correct and first time correct on the next slide. And we're going to do a little DI activity, and I'm going to show you what the first time correct thing is all about, the overall correct thing is all about, and it'll incorporate part affirming. So you'll get to see what that looks like. So
you want me to continue on? Do you want to share screen?
No, could you please continue on? Shoot. Okay. So let's go to the next slide. We can come back to that one. Next one. Next one. Sorry, this is the one I want. Okay, so this might look familiar to you. If you can imagine me, I'll use my I'll use an auditory signal, and I'll say go when I want you to read a word. Okay, so if you don't mind, at least a couple people saying it out loud, that'll be really helpful. I'm going to say, get ready to read the first word the fast way. And like I said, my signal will be go. And imagine me swooping under the signal as you read it. Get ready, go.
Mop.
Okay, good.
Mop.
That word is mop. I'd like you to say it again on my signal, and my signal is going to be the word go. Get ready, go.
Mop.
Yes, you get a point. You answered on my signal. Fantastic. Next word. What word? Get ready, go.
Cop.
Mop.
Good. Next word rhymes with cop. Get ready, go.
Cop.
Mop.
Good. You're going to miss the next one. Next word, read it the fast way. Get ready, go.
Was.
Was.
Stop. That word is was. What word? Go.
Was.
Was.
Right. And now what we're going to do is we're going to sound it out using the most common sounds. Ooh, s. Okay, that's how we sound it out. Here's how we say it. Was. Here we're going to sound it out. Ooh, s. Now we're going to say it. Get ready. Go.
Was.
Was. Okay, let's go back to the top, please. First word, what word? Go.
Mop.
Mop.
Next word, what word? Go.
Cop.
Next word, what word? Go.
Mop.
Don't get fooled. This next one is a bit tricky. When you've got it, put your thumb up in front of your chest so I know you know the word. Get ready. Go.
Was.
Was.
Yes, you got it. It's was. Everybody, last word. What word? Get ready. Go.
Oh.
Okay, now let's go to the next slide. Okay, so this is what we did. And I'm looking at first time correct and overall correct. First time correct, the first time a student or a group of students reads a list of word or a section, they should get between 70 and 80% correct. And that is instructional level. If it's below 70%, my husband is doing some very weird with a power tool I've never heard before.
We can't hear a thing, don't worry.
Okay, good. 70 to 80% correct first time. Okay, and so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words. If we were between 70 and 80% of 5, how many correct would that be? What's 80% of 5? 4 out of 5. Okay, so the first time we read mop, and can you circle that first time, Alicia, with your annotation? That's the first time. Here's the first time for cop. It's the one to the right. Circle it.
Mhm.
Yeah, good. Good. First time for top. First time for was. Remember, you got it
Mhm.
wrong. Okay. And then the first time for old, you got nope. Don't circle that
Oh, I see what
next
you're
to it.
saying.
Okay, so we're just doing first time correct. Do the one for old.
Oh, because it was down later.
Yeah, it's down there. So I move over every time I do a new word. So for the first time correct, it is 4 out of 5. That's 80%. That's an instructional level. It's not too easy. It's not too hard. If they're not making any mistakes, then they don't need to learn it. So that's first time correct, but the overall correct, and this is if I'm doing my job correctly as a teacher, then it'll be at least 90%. And this means that I've caught errors, that I've stopped, that I've made error corrections, and that I've part firmed. So here's what happened. The first circle, mop, cop, and top, those were all correct. We did those, and then we went to was. missed was, and then I did a correction. Nope, don't do that. That's not yet. I did a correction here, and that's the one that's right next to was.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's next. And then that swoopy one, the swoopy line, that's part firming. That's what we did next. After I did your error correction, we went back to the top and we did mop and cop and top and was again. And I put a prompt in there so that you wouldn't get fooled. And I gave you some extra time. And I said, put your thumb up in front of your chest, just like ding, 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 pay attention to that word. And then we went to the first time for old. Now, if we count all these up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, we've got 9 out of 10 correct for overall, which means I did my job as a teacher. I caught the errors, I provided error corrections, and I performed, giving extra practice so that students have extra opportunities to get it right. So that's part firming, and that's first time and overall correct. So when I was watching a lesson, I would take this information down in real time and I would just bracket around a minute. And students or people who are teaching using these programs should have between 9 and 15 student responses per minute in this kind of activity. So we know how fast it should be. We know what people should say if students get something wrong. We know how much extra practice we need, at least 90% overall. And we know how they should be doing pretty much basically the first time they read through it. So I think what I want to do now is go back a couple of slides and go to the 3 parts of a lesson. So 3 parts of a DI lesson. The first part is word attack, and that's when you get ready to read the story. And what it does is it pre-teaches new sounds, new words that are going to come up in the story. And in these programs, what they want to do is this is just like what you said, Alicia, earlier, get people reading and decoding as soon as possible. And it's very controlled so that students are not asked to read anything that they wouldn't know how to read. And so they introduce sounds in a particular order. And word attack is just lists of words or lists of sounds that they're practicing to get ready for story reading. Story reading is the next part. And they practice reading in connected text. They do multiple readings, and then not on the first one usually, but on subsequent readings, they answer comprehension questions. And then the workbook is sometimes called independent work, and that has to do with promoting generalization. It has to do with kind of shoring up comprehension of the story. And it also has to do with following directions. So sometimes it's following 3-part directions. Sometimes they'll have students turn to the back of the independent work page first, and they'll give a direction, and then they'll go do something else, and they'll come back to it. Well, the idea is that students need to be able to hold some information in their heads when they're following directions. So everything has a purpose. Everything in these lessons is either review or introduction of a new skill.
So Jenny, where's the writing come in? I mean, where are they writing words?
They're writing words in the independent work, and I didn't write that down. I should have.
That's part of the workbook piece.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the workbook. So they're writing words that they have read and kind of going to that recursive. So here's the error correction procedure. That word is blank. What word? Spell it. What word? Go back to the first word. That's perf firming. And here is the word attack portion down by the 1 in word reading. And then it tells you what to do. What sound, what word. So you read the underlined sound, then you read the whole word. Underlined sound, then the whole word. So it's all very carefully sequenced and laid out, and it's always the same. It's preparing to read the story in connected text, reading the story in connected text, and then doing independent work to promote generalization.
So one of the things that concerns me on the, and always has, is there a direction to descaffold these prompts? Because I've noticed you saying what sound, what word, what word, what word, what word. As a kid, that would drive me batty once I knew what you wanted. And I would, and also I in Slingerland, we, the goal is to promote independence. And so we have the scaffolds, we pull back scaffolds and our wording as quickly as possible.
So the
I'm curious
the
on
thing
that, if
about
there was that
scaffolds,
built in.
yeah, the thing about scaffolds in SRA is that they are removed once students have mastered that skill. And so one of the things you'll see is the macron, the line that goes over the whole vowel, right? The long vowel sound. So if there's an A with no macron, it's a. If there's an A with a macron, it's a. But by the time that students are expected to have mastered that A and the A sound, then they no longer put the macron.
That makes sense, thanks.
So one of the things that happens when starting one of these lessons is that you start with remediation. And so you're taking data the whole lesson about errors that the students have made. And the errors could be saying something incorrectly, saying nothing, or jumping a signal. So if students jump your signal and you can say, like I just gave the signal go, if people are saying it ahead of time, then I can't tell if everybody's on board with the skill. So it helps with small groups. It helps the teacher control the pace. And a lot of times we start with that remediation. And to me, that was just a whiteboard with some sounds or some words on it. Say, here's some tricky words from last time. Get ready to read them. What word, what word, what word? And it would go very nicely. So we start with that. And they're getting ready for story reading. And it's either a list or randomly on a page. And again, that part about 70 to 80% correct on the first reading is important. And then if we're doing our jobs, then we get 90% overall, which gives them good practice and makes sure that that they haven't practiced incorrectly. You can go to the next one. Students need to make prescribed error limits in order to understand what they read. So there'll be an error limit. Say if students read with fewer than 3 mistakes, go on to the next section. The first time through, they're usually taking 1 or 2 sentences and they're reading that. And at the subsequent readings, they typically answer comprehension questions. And then independent work. Sometimes directions are given a task at a time. Sometimes they're given all together, and it depends on where they are in the curriculum. It's a cumulative practice of skills, and it promotes that generalization. And yeah, independent work. And if you go to the teacher guide for any one of corrective reading or reading mastery or whatever, it'll tell you the purpose of each of the tasks. And if you can't figure it out, read the title of the task. It'll tell you what it's for. Practice the sound roar. That's the task. So those are some hints when you're going through that kind of instruction.
So thank you for that window into DI. We're going to give people an opportunity to reflect on this. And I did pull up the Slingerland lesson plan, but I think that we've had way too much time for not having you all talk into break small groups.
Absolutely, sorry about that.
That's all right. We all have, and it's important for another opportunity for learning. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that Slingerland lesson plan into the next section and give you an opportunity to chat about it, and I'll put it into the Jamboard. So, because I'm even for myself, it's like, okay, we all need a chance to talk. So
Yes.
I'm going to give you a breakout rooms, and I have 2 rooms of 3, 1 of 4. And normally let's do, you think about what was new, what was already known, what was reaffirmed. And I'm going to, looks like something just changed. Hi, Bethany. Let me check in how much time. We have 10 minutes. Does that work for you, Jenny?
Yes.
Okay. And I will open all rooms. Oops. Oh, no, looks good. Let me also pause the recording. So let's hear from some of the groups. We had 3, so maybe we can hear a representative from each group to share some of the things that you talked about.
I'll jump on and share for our group.
Thank you, Bethany.
We talked about part firming and how, that was new learning, and how Jenny's example of providing the lesson is just so helpful, so for us to kind of role play, if you will, that we're the students, and to see you deliver that lesson. Every time we've had a scenario like that, and either you or Alicia have delivered the lesson, it's just so eye-opening to me, because I think we tend to think, oh, this is so hard, it's a little overwhelming because it's unfamiliar territory, it's uncomfortable. But then whenever we have someone model it like that, it just makes it so doable, so manageable. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Bethany. I think I agree. It was useful too, because the part firming, I mean, logically it makes sense, but to see it and feel it, like, okay, now I'm with you. Bethany, was room 2? Do we have someone from rooms 1 or 3? Should have reminded you to pick choose your volunteer before coming back.
Well, I don't know if I'm, what group I was in, but we kind of talked about the whole class. And then it kind of got sidetracked to the end of the year and how tough it's been for most of us. So we just appreciated all the feedback we've got throughout the whole course.
Thank you, Del. We've been trying. Sometimes we felt like the chapters were a little bit small, and like this one, and we'll just go beyond, and we'll continue to see where does it inspire us. And we of course always want to know what inspires you as well from it. You were group 1, Del. Group 3, let's see, I can pull up and see who that was.
I can share.
Carrie.
So we talked about like just different curriculums that are out there. Because Kimberly and I used to teach together in Meade. And she's now a reading specialist. And so we were talking about just her direct instruction curriculums that she's using now, and how I'm trying to do more direct instruction with my 4th grade student who has dyslexia, and just how to go about that. So shared ideas.
Carrie, that's been a topic of a lot of districts, and I've been pulling more and more resources from other states who have their lists of approved curricula, or Massachusetts, and I think Louisiana, they've done reviews of different curricula. And we of course use the Reading League's curricula review tool, and What Works Clearinghouse. I mean, it's definitely a challenge trying to find what's going to be the right fit for your district. That's one of the things I appreciate about OSPI's Hexagon tool, to help see what's the right fit, as well as their equity review materials.
Well, in our K2 team right now, because I teach in the Catholic diocese, but we're all localized. So our school is able to choose, we can choose our own curriculum and just follow the standards. But so our K2 team right now is trying to figure out a good reading curriculum right now that they're going to adopt. So we're just kind of going through all of that. And I teach 3 and 4, but I'm still very much interested. And then plus with just having those few students who need my extra guided instruction daily, I'm just trying to figure out how to do that and make the best of it. So
I appreciate that, Carrie. I will say on your level, UFly has a lot of free resources. And I know a lot of school districts are piloting that for their foundational skills. Now, it's not for everything, it's just the foundational skills, just the word reading part of the strand, not the language comprehension side. But also, Erin Chapin from, I think, Yakima did a session with the Reading League recently on their process of how they went through choosing their curricula and how they narrowed it down and how they made their choices. So I think if
Okay.
we go to the Reading League Washington, you can find the recording of that.
That's
have to
good to know. Our reading specialist who is on this in this class, Kit DeVita, she ordered the UFly
Mhm.
to pilot for herself for her small group instruction with those kiddos. And then I've been using the free resources off of there for my 2 this year. All of your resources that you've shared have been really helpful. So thank you. And now I'm going to take the summer to go through them all.
See, that's what summer's for. I actually I don't have the recording, but I have the PDF of the slide deck that Erin used in her session, and I can put that into the chat box. It was fantastic learning that she shared. And that was from the Reading League Washington. All right, well, let's get into some practice time. So, and one of the things, I made a couple suggestions. One, we can look at the exercises in the chapter. You can talk about assessments. I did put a couple of sample, actually it's one student, and I will be honest, it was my daughter, on the Jamboard in frames 6 and 7. So that's what you'll see here is you'll see the student itself, and then you'll see her also in 4th grade. And so those are frames 6 or 7 on the Jamboard. And I will put the Slingerland lesson plan. Where's our Jamboard? Here it is. In the next frame, so that I might have to delete something off. Nothing's coming. I'll delete this one. It's been a long time, or we could revisit them and see how did we do. I'll delete the key terms so that we have a place for adding on the Slingerland lesson plan in here, frame 7, if you want to take a look at how we would do things at Chartwell. So I'll put that in there just for you to have some exploration when it comes to these scores, because they did use the achievement test scores for one of the samples in the book. I thought for people who don't have the book, you can at least take a look at here. And my question for you is, what strengths do you see? What needs do you see? And then you can, of course, see her scores again 3 years later and just have a conversation about those. So like I said, I'll put the Slingerland here into this. I want to make sure that everybody has Jamboard X. Oh, I just realized I wasn't sharing screen for you. What were you looking at that whole time? My apologies. So let's go back to, I had frozen screen sharing. So the practice and reflection time, exercises in the chapter, talk about any assessments that you use to look at your students, and then we have sample scores and questions or ahas. And when we come back, we'll have a reflection and processing time together. And we'll have some kind of congratulations for completing 10 sessions with us. So 10 times 2 hours, that's 20 hours. And we'll have any last minute or last thoughts before we close out. So we do want to give you a bit more time with this. I will put the timer on this time. So let me go and make sure I do that. So let me check. I'll pause the recording. There we go. Okay, so I do want to open it up to general questions. I do have, here's our reflect and process. I do know that looking at the data might have been a little tricky, so we can talk through that together. That's one thing I was doing with the one group that I went in to talk to. But I want to hear from you first. What were some of the things that you talked about in your conversations? Let's see.
I'll go.
We've lost a few people, but thanks, Carrie.
We were looking at the Jamboard, and yeah, the data, I feel like with both we kind of lacked context
Mhm.
for the data and then the page 7, they talked about the cards, but I don't recall this from the book.
No, this is a way of
totally
putting it
different,
all
right?
together. So this is a sample lesson plan from Mrs. Slingerland.
Mhm.
And when we're talking about multi-components, I wanted to use this as an example of how you can put everything together, but have both the individual flashcards of individual letters and sounds, decoding of individual words, taking a look at phrases, doing phrase reading from a book with the goal of independent writing. On the auditory side is again doing flashcards and then doing individual writing of words, adding affixes, dictating, and with the goal of independent writing. So an example of how we can bring this, again, multi-component intervention.
Yeah. Okay.
And with these, I'd be happy to talk about these first, if it'd be easier on a screen where I actually shared what this looks like. So in this sample, my first question, what are the strengths that you see? And so I'll highlight a few here. You notice what the group I was talking to was noticing, and yes, full disclosure, this was my daughter in first grade. Noticing the full scale IQ, verbal comprehension, visual spatial, fluid reasoning, those are all within the average range, 85 to 110. We had a low piece here. We talked about processing speed, and even that working memory is not strong, but it's within the average range, that 94. Should be like orange instead of green. A couple other things here. It's that reading fluency you notice here, and the other fluency pieces. So what would we do to help and support? Brittany was talking about how can you, with that processing speed, will it increase? It can, but it's going to take a lot of practice and it's going to take a lot of work. And that processing speed is what you are seeing in those low fluency skills and the math facts fluency. Jenny, is this your first time seeing these scores? Any thoughts on it from you or anyone else? You're muted, Jenny.
Not at the moment.
I didn't highlight this one, but you can see that 3 years later, we have really, so again, I'm going to draw our attention to the standard scores because that's the easiest for me to read, and knowing that the average range is 85 to 110. And you can see that what we had before, the oral reading fluency was 80 on the last one. Now we're looking at 90. So she's she's moved from 80 to 90, pretty comfortably there in the average range. Now here we see the only place that I would put in red would be her pseudo word decoding, which is her difficulty attacking a word she's never seen before. So when Jenny earlier was talking about that word attack, this is sounding out new weird words. But that's the only thing in the average range, under the average range at this point. That's the only weakness that I would say.
I have a question.
Mhm.
So if oral reading fluency, the standard score is 90, why is the percentile rank 25? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I can pull up the curve. Because the percentile rank is, you'll see, so 100 would be a percentile rank of 50.
Got it. All right,
Um,
makes sense. Thank
That's
you.
one of the reasons why and actually I can grab the bell curve to show it's the percentile ranks don't correspond very well to the average range. I think it's approximately so 85 is 85 to 110 is the average range. And that means the percentile range, I think about 16 is 85.
Okay.
I can pull up the curve for us to show. Hold on, find it for us. I used to always just bring up the curve to talk to families, but I always used percent of the standard scores because I wanted to talk about what is the average range.
Well, knowing this child, it corroborates for me that she's a talker. It also shows to me what she needed to work on, which is obviously that pseudo word. But in a way, aren't you comforted by that score?
Oh, tremendously.
For pseudo words, it's like, but these are words that don't exist. So in a way, she's approaching it from a very logical perspective.
Yes, agreed. So what
And
are
we
other-
get that a lot. I'm gonna say, sorry, we get that a lot with our EL learners. Is those I'm trying to think of what they're called in Dibbles. Basically they're the
Fluency.
yeah. And so like it might say like earth or something, like they're not actual words. But I also feel like, I mean, and yes, they need to be able to break those down first when they're syllabic decoding, but at the same time, a lot of those kiddos are looking, every word is supposed to mean something. So
Yeah.
when they're we have that a lot at our school because we have a massively high percentage of EL kiddos, and they just massively dip down on that pseudo word decoding because they are trying to make sense of every word that they hit, because that's what we do when we read. And then they're looking at that and they're like, this isn't a word. And they keep trying and they keep trying and they keep trying. And it doesn't make sense. So they get really low on the testing scores usually for those just because of that.
And in a way, I think it's not really fair to give kids who don't speak English as their first language nonsense words. Certainly never teach with them. They're only to be used in assessment for identifying most common sounds.
Well, and
Absolutely.
especially, I mean, if I just saw the pseudo word by itself, I would be concerned. But when I look at this, I say, okay, well, she's got some strong sound symbol correspondence relationships there. The pseudo word is weak, but that's going to, that also be curious if it has a time component to it as well. I did find the normal curve image. This is the best one I have. Unfortunately, it's got some glare because I took a picture of the one that was laminated. But to answer your question, Jenny, about the 16th percentile here being at 85%. So when she had, I think 25th percentile was approximately here at a standard score of, I think 90 something. So you can see the percentiles are down here.
Yep.
Corresponding to 100, that's our SMAT-SAB average standard score. So here's your typical in this green, your average range, as I mentioned, being 85 to 115. So
Got
in
it.
percentiles, that means 16th through 84th is your average range. Which is why I find percentiles extremely confusing for people. When people say, oh, it has to be below the 10th percentile. That means nothing to me in standard scores because it's kind of like 1.5 standard deviations. It's awkward. To me, this is really your average range. You want to be concerned about what's below that. And even especially concerned about below that. Sorry to get into statistics, but I think it was helpful to understand when you're looking at someone's scores. And that's one of the things that they did actually use in the text was some example scores. And I apologize, I didn't realize that putting a few in there would be such a hard conversation. What about some of the other questions or ahas that came out of your conversations? Anyone want to share? That's okay. We can finish early if you'd prefer. This sounds like the equivalent of people saying, having, when I was in college, people had me eating cookies so I wouldn't raise my hand, or they made me sit on my hands because they wanted
I
to
can see them doing that, Alicia.
here, eat instead of talk.
Very strategic.
So one last aha or thought from the book. I know Dell had mentioned earlier that they talked about the whole book series and what we talked about. Maybe if we have a nugget that people come up with or something from on the Jamboard, if we have a reflection that people would like to share. Yeah, before we close out, I'll go to our congratulations. Look what you have accomplished. We have done a lot. And I'll go to the Jamboard to see if there's one last reflection or closing item that someone would like to bring to our attention before we close out.
I think if nobody shares anything, I'm gonna put into the chat box one of the resources that I was checking out last night. And to me, this is from Words to Works writing handout. It's 78 pages long, and it contains everything that you need to know about the English language, basically. So I really enjoyed looking at that resource, and I thought I would just highlight it as something that you might find interesting or helpful or comprehensive.
Thank you, Jenny. I think that was in our writing one last time.
Yeah, I think it was too. I clicked on it for something and I read through the whole thing and I was like, wow, this is pretty amazing.
That would be, you know what? It should be here.
Okay,
And
I can put it in there if you want.
I could do it right now as we're talking, because that's
Okay.
what that should be linking to. So let me just. put it-
Right, okay, the links.
That means that I meant to put it in there, but I hadn't. So let's put that in because you probably got it from the slide deck instead.
I did.
William Van Cleve is amazing. If you ever get a chance to he has a great book called On Writing, his grammar stuff. So thank you, Jenny. I love that resource too. Oh, and looks like we need to put the slide decks in for the past few times.
Yeah.
So we will do that as well before we close out, so that you have access to all these things on the resources. Even whoever said, I don't know if it was Brittany or someone said over the summer, and maybe Emily, doing some reading and exploring over the summer. So feel free to contribute with a reflection, a thought. I'll go take a look at our Jamboard. And also it'd be nice to take a look at some of our hopes and goals. Hopefully you've taken a look and achieved some of these that you hoped to, and looking at more of your tier 1 and 2 instruction, looking at literacy supports and methods of delivery. And I don't see anything that we haven't addressed. That's students are wondering about resources to support kids who are deaf or hard of hearing. I'm still looking for those. I really am. If we have anything, we'll add them to that. Jenny, do you have anything for students who are deaf or hard of hearing?
Not that I can think of offhand.
We'll look for them. If we put them here, think of something, we'll let you know. But in the meantime, please stay in contact. You know how to reach both of us. We look forward to seeing you next time that we have a book study or for one of our classes. And thank you for joining us with Structured Literacy Interventions by
We do have a question in the chat box.
I see that. Emily, now that the course is over, our support person will be putting all the attendance in for us, and then she will be able to award clock hours after that. But all the attendance has to go in too. So you have to just wait and then you'll get some information. All right. Have a great day out there, everyone. Go enjoy the sun. I'll stop recording.